Welcome to Massive Beers. My name is Matt. We do the beer stuff here. A lot of different stuff. A lot of craft beer, mystery beers, macro. We dip in macro toes, or dip our toes in the macro water. Dip the macro toes. That sounds like some kind of weird fetish thing. I'm not going to get into it. Anyway, it has been decades since I've had this beer. Hams. God. So, quick story for those that haven't heard it before. I believe I've told it once or twice. I actually grew up in a bar. When my family, I moved from the Jersey Shore, like Tom's River Seaside, to the Poconos because it's where we vacation. Parents wanted to kind of uproot and just change where we lived. And we moved to Gouldsboro, Pennsylvania. I was probably like 12 at the time, 10, 12, or whatever. And when we first moved there, my parents purchased a bar, and there was apartments above the bar, and that's where we lived until a year or two went by, and my parents found a house. We moved there. A lot of like weird little just beer crap orbiting my life as a youngster, as you were, because when you own a bar and I would imagine anywhere in the United States, but Pennsylvania and the 80s and or late 80s, the 80s in general, and early 90s maybe to a certain extent. You just have distributors give you crap, and like there was a couple beers that really kind of just old school beers that really are cemented in my head. Genesee, Peels was a big one, and Hams was always there. It was always something that was kind of in orbit, and I've had the beer many a times, but I couldn't tell you the last time I had it. Maybe 15, 20 years, I don't know. But I saw this. I actually went into a place I wanted to pick up a 6-pack or 12-pack of Miller High Life. They didn't have it. Actually, they had a 12-pack of bottle or a 24-pack of bottles. So I just didn't want to buy a 24-pack of bottles. I saw this gleaming like a beacon of hope from a fridge. So we're going to review it. It says April 08, 24. That's the Best By date. We are January 21st, 2nd, something like that, 2024. So I'm assuming this is about 6 to 8 months, 12 months old, whatever. I could be wrong, but who knows. And it is American Adjunct Lager. So here we go. I am sitting here after an amazingly long and fantastical day. Hung out with my kid, went all kinds of places. He's amazing. Does not suck. And we're ripping into some hams. Life doesn't get much worse than that. I'm not gonna lie to you. I love this can art. This is like some of my favorite can art in general. It actually is timeless because I don't think they've really changed much. They've had different mascots, the Hams Bear and all that kind of stuff, but the Hams logo itself, the base graphic of it, hasn't really changed, and I don't think it's really gotten all that dated. It does look dated to a certain extent, but it's still timeless. It just kind of makes sense. It almost feeds off a little bit of geometric pattern that you see in a lot of like new school cans. The cobalt blue just kind of pops. The whole thing about it, I am a fan of the can. Beer-wise, it looks the part of, Adjunct Lager, hyper clear, maybe a skosh darker than I'd like. Makes me think it might be a little bit malty, maybe a little bit flabby. Just, white as white, it could be pinky of head, and just this beautiful, soft, almost snow globe-like kind of carbonation. As I spill it all over the place, it's gonna get a nose. Yeah, it's honestly malt driven, a little corny. I believe they use actually like corn syrup in this, so not like overtly negative. But when I talk about the darker color and I talk about a beer being a little bit flabby, that for me tends to come from a corn addition. Like not necessarily corn. I'm down with the corn, with corn being into an ingredient in a beer. Mexican lager, things like that. It can work out quite nice. But when you're using like corn syrup, they tend to come off a little bit more flabby, a little bit heavy. This has a little bit of telltale sign of that, but there is a hot presence to the beer also. A bit of bittering, probably a decent amount larger than what you typically expect from an American Adjunct Lager, especially from one of the classics. I mean, again, we're speaking at, what's the word I'm looking for? It's Hams. We're not saying this is like hoppy like Czech Pills or anything like that. Do I get an ABV on this sucker? Oh, here it is. Ingredients: water, barley malt, corn syrup, and yeast and hops. Corn syrup is used as part of the brewing process only. Hams never uses high fructose corn syrup. It's a fermentable sugar is what they're doing. Actually, it's weird. I don't see an ABV on it, so I'm kind of curious. Maybe we'll just guess at it and see what we end up at the end. I mean, it's probably going to be classic, 3.5 to 4.2. But yeah, not a bad beer by any stretch. Let's dive in. Cheers, y'all. I can rip on that. There is a decent hop presence here. Again, for its style of beer, for who's making it, you're surprised to get that level of hoppiness out of it. It's just not malt forward, neutral hop. There is a bit of bitterness to it, ever so slightly. So you get a bit of that bittering, a little bit of a pop. Again, we're not getting to adjunct, Czech lager level kind of bittering, but it's definitely there, much elevated beyond what you typically get from a lot of the staple kind of Bud Light, Miller Lite, or just Bud, Miller, Coors, that kind of thing. There is that flabbiness that I was talking about that tends to come with a bit of corn syrup. I'm not going to sit here and say I absolutely despise it or hate it. It just kind of pulls down the crispiness of the beer and the drinkability down a little bit. So it has a little bit more density to the beer. It doesn't add an overt flavor. It's more of a mouthfeel kind of just thickness to it. That just kind of makes it, like I like to call it, a little bit flabby. There's a nice sweetness to it, but not overly sweet. Other than that, relatively clean. If I'm going to get a little bit nitpicky, maybe a little bit of DMS, maybe a little cream corniness going on. Kind of makes sense when you're dealing with corn syrup. You're kind of floating in there, even though DMS is an off flavor. It has nothing to do with actual corn, blah, 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 blah. But not a negative beer by any stretch. You give me a sixer of this at a party at a bonfire, I'm happy. I'm cool with it. It's fine. You start to say, is this better than, and maybe I should do this for these beers rather than ranking them against other beers. Is this better than Miller High Life? Let's use that as a tentpole. Is this better than the Mount Rushmore of what I would call macro-ish beers, the Jenny Creams of the world, the Miller High Lifes of the world? It's a step below for me, but definitely not a negative beer. You're talking about $5.50 for a 6-pack of 16-ounce pounder cans. Ain't getting angry at it. Not getting angry. Because, when you talk about those other beers, you're usually looking around my area. You're usually looking around $6.50 for 6-packs, 12-ounce cans. So, you get a little bit more bang for your buck. And definitely, a little nostalgia hit here to where I don't mind what's going on. So there you go. A little bit of hams in the book. Not a negative beer by any stretch. I'm not going to sit here and say it's fantastical and something I'm going to rip all the time. But at the same time, brought me down a little bit of memory lane. Made me make a fun little macro beer review. And that does not suck. So yeah, like I said, Mount Rushmore status of macros for me, no. Valued availability, all over, cheap, and leave you with if you like what we guess. If you don't mind macro beer, which is totally fine, and you want a little bit of density to it, again, not a thick beer, but a little bit more dense than you get from some of the classic beers, you'll dig this. Hams, have you been to the Brewing? Do they even exist anymore? I don't even know. They're probably owned by Miller Coors or something like that at this point. Actually, they'll probably tell me on here, right? Yeah, the Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I don't. Have you been to the brewery? Do they have a brewery? Do they have a tasting room? That would be fantastic. What do you think of hams? What are some of your favorite macro American adjunct beers? Which ones would you like me to review? That would be fun. I'll take requests. All that fun stuff down there. Hopefully enjoyed a review. Hopefully enjoying a little bit of hams right now. Hopefully see you next time. Cheers, y'all.